Now you mentioned the Silk Road. You've traveled the
Yeah.
Silk Road then. So you would be
Yeah.
our second guest who has traveled the Silk Road. That's
Oh,
pretty impressive. Yeah.
yeah.
We
Well,
we
some parts are only some parts are accessible. Uh, Obviously, much of Western China, so Gansu and Xinjiang provinces in the far west of China, they were crucial parts of the Silk Roads, and you can travel those. There's a lot of tour companies. I mentioned Smithsonian, and I've worked for other travel companies as well that will take tours there. A lot of folks I've met on ships also do Silk Road trips. Then the central part is fine. So all through Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, that's where the great trading cities of Central Asia were and are, like Samarkand, Bukhara, and so on. But then once you get any further west, you're in Iran, which, although I've got many colleagues there, academic colleagues, just not a safe place for us to travel at the moment. And
hmm
then the routes went through Iran, down across the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, so through Iraq today, and then through Syria and onto the Mediterranean coast. So that entire western section is really not a feasible place to travel the Silk Roads today. But
hmm
everywhere else, to the east and so on, is very feasible. So yeah, I'd recommend to any of your listeners that are thinking about that, just have a look online. There are many companies that lead really good tours into Central Asia, but also Western China. Beautiful parts of the world. So yeah, I've got to do that many times over the years as a guide lecturer is my official role.
Okay. And I mean, it's the Silk Road was, like, as you said very eloquently. I mean, it was so important for trade, and trade is what really brings countries together and brings people who may feel differently about each other, but they trading with each other makes them understand each other, and so it's quite a good influence for the world.
Yeah, look, I couldn't agree more. And a lot of my lectures do focus on trade connections. And a lot of my books also are focused on trade between different parts of the world because it's been, even since like the Paleolithic, the old Stone Age, long before people became sedentary and started farming and, settling down, even when humans were essentially nomadic foragers, we were trading long distances. You've got something up here that we really want. So in Australia, for example, we've got special shells, pearl shells from the far north, the tropical north, that end up way down the bottom of the country that have clearly come through these long distance land trade routes, through the Australian deserts and so on. And, Polynesian migrants who settle all the islands of the Pacific. You've got these massive trade connections from like Madagascar to Easter Island, tens of thousands of miles,
hmm
So trade, exchanging our goods for your goods has been one of the fundamental functions of like human societies from the very beginning. And so that's a very good theme for me as a lecturer to explore. Pretty well in every talk I ever give, at some stage, there'll be some discussion of, what was traded here, why did people settle here, what was the valuable resource that was available here, and so
hmm
on. And I agree. So, I'm not at all political, and my role as a lecturer, a public lecturer, is not to be political. But the more we facilitate free trade, I think, just in general, as a historian, the better for the world.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, history has shown that time and again.
Yeah,
Yeah, it shrinks the world.
yeah,
Excuse me.
sure.
And in your bio, or at least there's a lot about you online. You're you're a pretty public guy. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
it says that you've been a trekker also in the past. So you've done more than just take people on tours of the Silk Road.
Yeah.
Tell us about some of your interesting treks that you've done over the year.
Yeah, sure. I got this sort of mountain hiking bug. I mentioned we moved to the UK and lived in London as a from 11 to sort of 16, and I joined a bunch of outdoor clubs in London, um, uh, uh, mountain hiking, mountain trekking, cross country skiing, and so on. So even as a kid, I'd come home to mum and say, "Mum, is it okay if I go to the Yorkshire Moors for 2 weeks and go cross country skiing in the middle of winter?" And she'd say, "Yes, darling, that's fine. Off you go." Or, "Mum, is it okay if we go to Scotland to go ice climbing for a week?" Yeah, that's fine. So they were
Wow,
very good to me, my parents.
that's
They
great.
trusted all these instructors. I got to meet them all. So
Uh-huh.
I became a rock climber, did a lot of ice climbing and so on as well.
Woo.
Um, but then as I got older and married and had children, transitioned to sort of mountain trekking, often very high altitude trekking. I know you said you're at 2,600 feet, so you would have felt it when you first got there. But I have done some wonderful treks in the Himalayas, in Nepal. I've trekked up some great mountains in Mongolia. Been to Africa, trekked in the Mount Kenya region to the summit of Mount Kenya, and then Kilimanjaro, of course. So these are all,
He says,
these are
of
nice.
course.
Well, I mean, if you go to Africa and you're a trekker, what are you
Yeah,
going to
you
do
got
with
to
the
go
Got
to
to
that.
do
Yeah, you got to do.
Kilimanjaro, certainly. Yeah.
Achilles.
Yeah.
So, I used to be a good technical climber with ropes and crampons and
Wow.
proper rock climbing and so on. And but as an older man now, I enjoy just trekking in beautiful mountains, even though the altitude is, once you get above, say, 13,000 feet or whatever, you really feel it. And when you're up to 18, 19, 20,000 feet above sea level, it's brutal. And then you think those elite Himalayan mountaineers climb another 8,000 feet above this again without oxygen
Yeah.
on some of the steepest, most dangerous ice slopes you can imagine in the world, and sort of just kick their way up with their two axes and their crampons, and get to the top before breakfast. And you
Yeah.
think,
It is incredible, isn't it?